Welcome, my friends. Sit and listen to the tale of brave pioneers, starting out in Oklahoma in 1889 and facing dark supernatural powers. The story is told by a doctor in an asylum after showing the strange creature in room B116. Walker and Audrey are young pioneers travelling to Oklahoma to start their lives afresh. When Audrey uncovers a nest of rattlesnakes on their journey, she kills them with disastrous consequences on both their lives. All in The Curse of Yig. To continue to make content, we need to grow. So please like, subscribe, but just as importantly, comment and share. The algorithm must be fed, or else it will consume the channel, and comments are one of its favourite meals. Only you can feed it. In part 1, we visit the asylum and hear of the start of Walker and Audrey's journey. Come, sit, watch and listen as it's time to enter the Cave of Chronicles. In 1925, I went into Oklahoma looking for snake lore, and I came out with a fear of snakes that will last me the rest of my life. I admit it is foolish, since there are natural explanations for everything I saw and heard, but it masters me nonetheless. If the old story had been all there was to it, I would not have been so badly shaken. My work as an American Indian ethnologist has hardened me to all kinds of extravagant legendary, and I know that simple white people can beat the natives at their own game when it comes to fanciful inventions. But I can't forget what I saw with my own eyes at the insane asylum in Guthrie. I called at that asylum because a few of the older settlers told me I would find something important there. Neither natives nor white men would discuss the snake god legends I had come to trace. The oil boom newcomers, of course, knew nothing of such matters, and the natives and old pioneers were plainly frightened when I spoke of them. Not more than 6 or 7 people mentioned the asylum, and those who did were careful to talk in whispers. But the whispers said that Dr. McNeil could show me a very terrible relic and tell me what I wanted to know. He could explain why Yig, the half-human father of serpents, is a shunned and feared subject in central Oklahoma, and why old settlers shiver at the secret native orgies which make the autumn days and nights hideous with the ceaseless beating of tom-toms in lonely places. It was with the scent of a hound on the trail that I went to Guthrie, for I had spent many years collecting data on the evolution of serpent worship among the natives. I had always felt, from well-defined undertones of legend and archaeology, that great Quetzalcoatl, benign snake god of the Mexicans, had had an older and darker prototype, and during recent months I had well nigh proved it in a series of researches stretching from Guatemala to the Oklahoma plains. but everything was tantalizing and incomplete. For above the border, the cult of the snake was hedged about by fear and furtiveness. Now it appeared that a new and copious source of data was about to dawn, and I sought the head of the asylum with an eagerness I did not try to cloak. Dr. McNeil was a small, clean-shaven man of somewhat advanced years, and I saw at once from his speech and manner that he was a scholar of no mean attainments in many branches outside his profession. Grave and doubtful when I first made known my errand, his face grew thoughtful as he carefully scanned my credentials and the letter of introduction which a kindly old ex-American Indian agent had given me.
So, you've been studying the Yig legend, eh?
He reflected sententiously.
I know that many of our Oklahoma ethnologists have tried to connect it with Quetzalcoatl, but I don't think any of them have traced the intermediate steps so well. You've done remarkable work for a man as young as you seem to be, and you certainly deserve all the data we can give. I don't suppose old Major Moore or any of the others told you what it is I have here. They don't like to talk about it, and neither do I. It is very tragic and very horrible, but that is all. I refuse to consider it anything supernatural. There's a story about it that I'll tell you after you see it. A devilish sad story, but one that I won't call magic. It merely shows the potency that belief has over some people. I'll admit there are times when I feel a shiver that's more than physical, but in daylight I set it all down to nerves. I'm not a young fellow anymore, alas. To come to the point, the thing I have is what you might call a victim of Yig's curse. A physical, living victim. We don't let the bulk of the nurses see it, although most of them know it's here. There are just two steady old chaps whom I let feed it and clean out its quarters. Used to be three, but good old Stevens passed on a few years ago. I suppose I'll have to break in a new group pretty soon, for the thing doesn't seem to age or change that much, and we old boys can't last forever. Maybe the ethics of the near future will let us give it a merciful release, but it's hard to tell. Did you see that single ground glass basement window over the east wing when you came up the drive? That's where it is. I'll take you there myself now. You needn't make any comment, just look through the movable panel in the door and thank God the light isn't any stronger. Then I'll tell you the story, or as much as I've been able to piece together.
We walked downstairs very quietly and did not talk as we treaded the corridors of the seemingly deserted basement. Dr. McNeil unlocked a grey painted steel door, but it was only a bulkhead leading to a further stretch of hallway. At length he paused before a door marked B116, opened a small observation panel which he could use only by standing on tiptoe, and pounded several times upon the painted metal as if to arouse the occupant, whatever it might be. A faint stench came from the aperture as the doctor unclosed it, and I fancied his pounding elicited a kind of low hissing response. Finally, he motioned me to replace him at the peephole, and I did so with a causeless and increasing tremor. The barred ground glass window, close to the earth outside, admitted only a feeble and uncertain pallor, and I had to look into the malodorous den for several seconds before I could see what was crawling and wriggling about on the straw-covered floor, emitting every now and then a weak and vacuous hiss. Then the shadowed outlines began to take shape, and I perceived the squirming entity bore some remote resemblance to a human form laid flat on its belly. I clutched at the door handle for support as I tried to keep from fainting. The moving object was almost of human size and entirely devoid of clothing. It was absolutely hairless, and its tawny-looking back seemed subtly squamous in the dim, ghoulish light. Around the shoulders, it was rather speckled and brownish, and the head was very curiously flat. As it looked up to hiss at me, I saw that the beady little black eyes were damnably anthropoid, but I could not bear to study them long. They fastened themselves on me with a horrible persistence, so that I closed the panel gaspingly and left the creature to wriggle about unseen in its matted straw and spectral twilight. I must have reeled a bit, for I saw that the doctor was gently holding my arm as he guided me away. I was stuttering over and over again. But for God's sake, what is it? Dr. McNeil told me the story in his private office as I sprawled opposite him in an easy chair. The gold and crimson of late afternoon changed to the violet of early dusk, but I still sat, awed and motionless. I resented every ring of the telephone and every whir of the buzzer, and I could have cursed the nurses and interns whose knocks now and then summoned the doctor briefly to the outer office. Night came, and I was glad my host switched on all the lights. Scientist though I was, my zeal for research was half forgotten amid such breathless ecstasies of fright as a small boy might feel when whispered witch tales go the rounds of the chimney corner. It seems that Yig, the snake god of the Central Plains tribes, presumably the primal source of the more southerly Quetzalcoatl or Kulakan, was an old, half-anthropomorphic devil of highly arbitrary and capricious nature. He was not wholly evil, and was usually quite well disposed towards those who gave proper respect to him and his children, the serpents. But in the autumn, he became abnormally ravenous and had to be driven away by means of suitable rites. That was why the tom-toms in the Pawnee, Wichita and Caddo County pounded ceaselessly week in and week out in August, September and October, and why the medicine men made strange noises with rattles and whistles, curiously like those of the Aztecs and Mayas. Yig's chief trait was a relentless devotion to his children, a devotion so great that the natives almost feared to protect themselves from the venomous rattlesnakes which thronged the region. Frightful clandestine tales hinted at his vengeance upon mortals who flouted him or wreaked harm upon his wriggling progeny. His chosen method being to turn his victim, after suitable tortures, to a spotted snake. In the old days of the Indian Territory, the doctor went on, there was not quite so much secrecy about Yig. The plains tribes, less cautious than the desert nomads and pueblos, talked quite freely of their legends and autumn ceremonies with the first Indian agents, and let considerable of the folklore spread out through the neighbouring regions of the white settlement. The Great Fear came in the land rush days of '89, when some extraordinary incidents have been rumoured, and the rumours sustained by what seemed to be hideously tangible proofs. Indians said that the new white men did not know how to get on with Yig, and afterwards the settlers came to take that theory at face value. Now, no old-timer in middle Oklahoma, white or not, could be induced to breathe a word about the snake god, except in vague hints. Yet, after all, the doctor added with almost needless emphasis, the only truly authenticated horror has been a thing of pitiful tragedy rather than of bewitchment. It was all very material and cruel, even that last phase which had caused so much dispute. Dr. McNeil paused and cleared his throat before getting down to his special story, and I felt a tingling sensation, as when a theatre curtain rises. The thing had begun when Walker Davies and his wife Audrey left Arkansas to settle in the newly opened public lands in the spring of 1889, and the end had come in the country of the Wichitas, north of the Washita River, in what is at present Caddo County. There is a small village called Binger there now, and the railway goes through, but otherwise the place is less changed than other parts of Oklahoma. It is still a section of farms and ranches, quite productive in these days since the great oil fields do not come very close. Walker and Audrey had come from Franklin County in the Ozarks with a canvas-topped wagon, 2 mules, and an ancient and useless dog called Wolf, and all their household goods. They were typical hill folk, youngish and perhaps a little more ambitious than most, and looked forward to a life of better returns for their hard work than they had had in Arkansas. Both were lean, raw-boned specimens, the man tall, sandy and grey-eyed, and the woman short and rather dark, with a black straightness of hair suggesting a slight native admixture. In general, there was very little of distinction about them, and but for one thing, their annals might not have differed from those of thousands of other pioneers who flocked into the new country at that time. The thing was Walker's almost epileptic fear of snakes, which some laid to prenatal causes, and some said came from a dark prophecy about his end, which an old native squaw had tried to scare him when he was small. Whatever the cause, the effect was marked indeed, for despite his strong general courage, the very mention of a snake would cause him to go faint and pale, while the sight of even a tiny specimen could produce a shock, sometimes bordering on a convulsion seizure. The Davies started out early in the year in the hope of being on their new land for spring ploughing. Travel was slow, for the roads were bad in Arkansas, and while in the territory there were great stretches of rolling hills and red sandy barrens without any roads whatever. As the terrain grew flatter, the change from their native mountains depressed them more perhaps than they realised. But they found that the people in the Indian agencies were very affable, while most of the settled natives seemed friendly and civil. Now and then they encountered a fellow pioneer with whom crude pleasantries and expressions of amiable rivalry were generally exchanged. Owing to the season, there were not many snakes in evidence, so Walker did not suffer from his special temperamental weakness. In the earlier stages of the journey, too, there were no Indian snake legends to trouble him, for the transplanted tribes from the southeast do not share the wilder beliefs of their western neighbours. As fate would have it, it was a white man at Arkhamhorror in the Creek County who gave the Davies the first hint of the Yig beliefs, a hint which had a curiously fascinating effect on Walker and caused him to ask questions very freely after that. Before long, Walker's fascination had developed into a bad case of fright. He took the most extraordinary precautions at each of the nightly camps, always clearing away whatever vegetation he found and avoiding stony places wherever he could. Every clump of stunted bushes and every cleft in the great slab-like rocks seemed to him now to hide malevolent serpents, while every human figure, not obviously part of a settlement or emigrant train, seemed to him a potential snake god, till nearness had proved the contrary. Fortunately, no troublesome encounters came at this stage to shake his nerves still further. As they approached the Kickapoo country, they found it harder and harder to avoid camping near rocks. Finally, it was no longer possible, and poor Walker was reduced to the puerile expedient of droning some of the rustic anti-snake charms he had learned in his boyhood. 2 or 3 times a snake was really glimpsed, and these sights did not help the sufferer in his efforts to preserve composure. So ends part 1 of The Curse of Yig. In part 2, we hear of Walker and Audrey settling into their new home in Oklahoma, despite mystic concerns and native rituals. We currently release at least 3 episodes a week, more on the weeks that we release a complete version. So check the channel page for more stories. Link above. If you enjoyed the tale, it helps us if you let others know, so please click the like button. Subscribing will let you travel with us on future adventures, with the bell notifying you as we set off. If you want to join our band of intrepid explorers of the unknown, come visit us on Patreon. There we have a Discord server where you can share in the discussion about the stories told with both myself and the other members, and even join the book club. There will be behind the scenes content, early access content, and options to guide which stories are chosen as the membership grows. There are even tiers to get your own stories produced, and a free tier if you just want notifications and updates. YouTube memberships will follow when I have enough subscribers. If you subscribe, it will help. Please only join if you can afford to. Let me know in the comments if there are any specific stories you would like to see portrayed in this format. I'm even open to suggestions on how I can improve the content. I try and reply to every comment, so your input will not be ignored. See the description for details of the Patreon, our other social media pages, and for a link to Canje Studios to find out about Arkham horror board games. Click on the end screen to subscribe, go to the next story in the series, or to hear about the Call of Cthulhu. Until next time, farewell. But remember, even when searching for knowledge, you have to pay the price and face the consequences.